Hi, this is the Cat's Library. I'll be your librarian today. So here's the Halloween special for this year. I didn't feel like getting too scary, and so this is going to be chill. I'm going to try out a different editing. I'm also going to try out a different editing style this time around. Engage speed paint. I started by drawing a ghost because ghosts are one of my favorite Halloween creatures / fantasy archetypes. I tried out a couple poses to try to figure out what I wanted the ghost personality to be. The first one was one of my stock poses of just standing and waving. The next was a hunched over sort of more shy pose with long hair over the eyes. The last one that I ended up going with was this floating in the air looking maniacal sort of thing. When I'm creating characters, I have certain stock personalities that I end up repeating a lot by accident over different projects. This ghost sort of reminds me of Blaze, that Glassman character that I kept changing the name of. Blaze sort of had an apathetic streak though, and I imagine that this character that I'm drawing is always at an emotional 10. I drew her in more modern fashion, so she probably died more or less recently. Maybe in the 90s to early 2000s at the earliest. She was murdered and was either drowned or pushed off a building on Halloween night. Probably by her boyfriend or something. These characters are in a sort of urban fantasy environment where supernatural creatures and normal people coexist with each other. There are probably government outreach programs or charities where trained psychologists try to help ghosts to move on. If anyone tries to help her move on, she doesn't trust them because she was always scared of dying and purposefully trying to leave the mortal plane of existence. Like, why am I so concerned with getting her to leave anyway? What's their angle? What are the psychologists getting out of it? I'm also thinking that she's interacting with counselors primarily because she was a foster kid who didn't really have a family when she was alive. Some of her previous foster parents came to visit her a bit after the funeral, but slowly stopped coming as often. She has worked on her powers and has become a very powerful poltergeist, which she uses to pull pranks on the living. Since she hasn't done anything illegal, the Van Helsing National Defense Unit, VHNDU, can't exercise her to limbo, especially since that's capital punishment. They can't even put her under house arrest. She has graduated from high school multiple times. She even has a doctorate in philosophy that she has no intention of using, but she is allowed to go back every year that she wants so that she can socialize with people around her own age. And also that's where she died, so she kind of lives there. She goes to a mixed school of mortals and immortals. She still has the same mentality that she had when she died at 15, and can't really do anything other than a quick kiss or a handhold, and so she is legally allowed to date teenage mortals. Living memories are stronger than undead memories. She doesn't want to, though, or make close friends, because that's her issue. Anytime someone starts getting too close, she's all like, "I am Daphne, keeper of the darkness. Tremble before my power, mortal, as we take over this subpar establishment of learning to form into my image." Also, those jeans make you look fat. Tyler only took you to the dance because he lost a bet. And I think eating puppies is ethical in certain situations. See you at graduation. I think that her story is about gaining both a group of friends and a boyfriend, finally opening up with other people. After that, she needs to stay and make sure that they are all okay as the group grows up. Make sure that they have happy, fulfilling lives so that they won't become ghosts, and only then can she be completely at peace. Only then can she move on. Next up, I drew the vampire. I'm going to go with more of an original Dracula movie version of vampires. I made up a lot of the drawing as I went along. I didn't have much in mind for how I wanted this guy to look. I knew that I wanted him to be a touch narcissistic because I'm pretty sure that's the horror behind vampires. They are pretty, tend to be aristocratic, can be literally charming, are very preoccupied with being all of these things, and suck the life out of anyone they deem beneath them. This guy is between 16 and 17, and so will automatically have some of the traits because he is a child, so maybe there is some help for him. I'm going to say that vampires in this world have a proclivity to certain superiority complexes and personality disorders, but they can be taught to be good, upstanding members of society. Whether this is genuine or not is up for debate. I think that some of them are, but it's pretty rare. Unfortunately, vampires need fresh blood from a human because they are literally sucking the life essence in the blood from the subject. In other words, they are eating part of that person's ghost. When a ghost is still attached to a living person, it can still regenerate. If a vampire tries to eat a dead ghost, the ghost will go into the equivalent of going into shock and will instinctually transport to limbo. Usually the fear that something is going to happen to them is enough to send a ghost to limbo, so one of the methods on how the VHNDU exercises ghosts is by scaring them. Wait, we're off ghosts and onto the vampire section. Anyway, there are people who volunteer for that, qualified people who are usually supernatural themselves, and if a vampire gets married to someone with a soul, then they don't need to feed at all. Also, by this point, you probably noticed that I've drawn two characters here. The other guy's Fred. Fred told the vampire that his shirt was too red in 2nd grade. For some reason, despite it being the first insult that the vampire had ever received, the two somehow became the best of friends. Fred, from that moment on, never left the vampire's side, and did everything in his power to make the vampire's life easier and for him to look cooler. Fred is definitely not enchanted to do all of those things. Why would you say that? No, don't call the authorities. Fred is fine. If you ever think that Fred is not fine, just repeat to yourself that he is fine, and that he will be. That was also not one of the most difficult poses for me to look right for an aspect of the drawing that was meant to fade into the background. In all seriousness, Fred eventually gains his freedom because his parents noticed what was going on, eventually, and they moved the family out of state where the connection was severed after a few months without contact. If this video gets to 10 likes, then Fred grows up to be in the VHNDU and gets vengeance or justice, and if it doesn't get the 10 likes, he lives a long, happy life with the regret that the vampire got off scot-free, always at the back of his mind. So his fate is in your hands. For the ghost girl, I had a minimalistic implied wallpaper in a haunted house and floorboards background. For some conceivable reason, I decided to draw the vampire in the woods next to a stream. I'm from Washington, and so I subconsciously made the woods look like the woods in the Pacific Northwest, which accidentally gave him Twilight vampire vibes. I guess it's fine. I'm not sure what they are doing in the woods dressed like this, though. Maybe these are the woods outside of the school and they got detention and so are going home late. But the vampire saw the ghost from the previous drawing and decided to try to flirt with her by showing her how awesome he is. He has a lot of confidence for someone in his late teens who couldn't figure out how to tie his shoelaces and so has Velcro sneakers. So after I failed tremendously on the new editing technique, I added in this drawing real quick. I lost an hour and a half because my editing software crashed. I think I might have kept it open for too long or something, or I left it open for too long during the crazy editing and moved the whole document to the wrong place when it kept crashing during that. It was the best part too. Anyway, character. This is Mila. She is my interpretation of a classic Halloween witch, but I'm going to call her an alchemist or magician. So in this universe, there are certain people who are born with green skin and mild supernatural powers. These powers are useful in making potions and alchemy, which has in turn greatly improved medicine, chemistry, agriculture, cosmetics, and other fields in this version of Earth. Mila is from the not-too-distant future, where magic and technology have interlaced even further than in the present. They are also having an old-timey fashion resurgence, where they are all about buckles that don't really attach to anything. Her wand is mostly technological, and she was fiddling around with some spell programs and accidentally coded a time travel spell and ended up in the present, with no way to get back because it used the whole power source. I think she became Daphne's best friend and wingman when it comes to finding dates, or wing woman, I don't know how that works. I'm going back and forth on Daphne ending up with a mummy or a creature from the Black Lagoon because I just watched that movie recently. I didn't do a werewolf because the video that I made last year was all about werewolves, and I just did a wolf video. But maybe Mila ends up with a werewolf, and Daphne ends up in a love triangle that she definitely wouldn't want due to her issues, and ends up with a normal human guy who left her alone through all of the emotional drama, and let her come to him. Mila probably finds the power within herself to fix the wand after some grand life-changing adventure, and is able to go home to the future and past at will. I'm going to say it's time loop mentality, where she always went into the past and then went to the future, and so it doesn't really mess anything up. I said I wanted to challenge myself to write more story stuff than design stuff, but I'm writing this at the last minute, so I looked up some references for her shirt collar, because that is something that always trips me up for some reason. One of the problems using a witch for inspiration is that typically they are in more historical fashion, and I wanted her to look modern to match everyone else, and so I worked to find a good balance. This is probably one of the best outfits I've ever done. I like that the beanie points up to look pointed. Yeah, that's a sentence. I also like that each of the focus characters have a different type of shoe, those being shoelaces, Velcro, and buckle. However, I tried to keep the billowy pants from the first sketches as a sort of legging, and it just looks like she's wearing pantaloons, even though that doesn't really make sense, poking out and with the rest of the outfit. On to the section that was cut out. I tweaked the anatomy of the legs and hips a lot since that sort of got lost with the addition of the skirt, and trying to get the pose to look right over whether it looked like her hip was out of place. I worked really hard with the colors since I wanted there to be a lot of them in contrast to the previous two drawings. Basically, it was different shades of green, orange, and purple with a little bit of yellow. That I was trying to get to look between green and orange, and also gray and black. The complication was on which elements were the most saturated and which were dark in value and which were light. I wanted her to have a darker skin tone since everyone else was pretty pale. But I think I'm out of practice since I kept trying to make the clothes the same value as her skin on accident. I fiddled with the contrast tool a lot and the hair went black at one point, but I thought that was too cliche and Vince already had black hair. She might have looked better with a real human skin tone, and I'm not sure that the orange and green work as well as I hoped. I think that this is one of the first times that I've drawn underlighting, and I think it looks pretty good. I also added in the most abstract out of all of the backgrounds, but it is still my favorite even though it's so simple. And I liking. That's it for today? I know I'm forgetting something. Happy Halloween, everyone. I'll see you when I see you. Bye!